Hey, so I know I took kind of a sabbatical from movies in January, which is fine because January is sometimes known as a dumping ground for a lot of bad stuff. But I thought I should get back into some regular movie reviews here in February. And this was a pretty good one to start off on this new year with Hail Caesar by the Coen Brothers. Now, your enjoyment of this movie is probably going to be depending on whether or not you enjoyed a lot more of their tangential driven movies more so. Like if you enjoyed stuff like Big Lebowski or to a lesser extent Burn After Reading, in which there is kind of a plot going on, but it's more about just these interactions and these quirky characters and scenarios that pop up here and there that engage you for a couple of minutes at a time, and then you're back to whatever. If you're cool with that, then this movie should be fine for you. I enjoyed it very much so. I thought it was very funny. Mainly just because of that fact, of the fact that the cast in this movie, they aren't, sleepwalking through anything. They are very, very funny, very engaging, and they make the most out of what little screen time they have here. I mean, you've got Josh Brolin heading the cast as Eddie Mannix, this Hollywoodland fixer for this studio, which apparently this is based on a real person and is kind of an exaggerated account maybe of some of the stuff he had to deal with in the 50s when it comes to solving studio problems or making sure talent stays out of scandals and so forth, like what he does to that extent. And it's really just kind of a day in the life for this guy. I know the trailers are kind of touting this as some kind of Hollywoodland caper with George Clooney being abducted by people, but that's really only in the movie here and there. I mean, it is kind of a big focal point in the plot, maybe, but at the same time, I'm more focused on like whatever situation Josh Brolin is dealing with in the interim when he's not dealing with that particular problem. For example, you've got Scarlett Johansson playing kind of this Esther Williams type who looks like an all-American sweetheart, when the camera's on, but when it's off of her, she's like chain smoking and talking about like, I'm not exactly sure who my kid's dad is, so he has to work this plan with a publicist about, the kid's adopted. And before she reveals that it's, she even has a kid, that they have to come up with this whole fabricated story that she adopted this kid instead of being like, who knows who the father is. And also other issues that come up with regards to, say, Tilda Swinton showing up for a little bit at a time as twins, both of them gossip columnists. And this is where the movie kind of treads from like Coen Brothers comedy to also Mel Brooks comedy in a way. Not so much that it goes into that really exaggerated world that Mel Brooks likes to explore from time to time, but also the fact that like there's hints here and there. Like, for example, with this Tilda Swinton twin sisters gossip columnist plot line, one of them wants to score an interview with George Clooney's character, who is this headlining type of actor in the studio's big release, which is going to be Hail Caesar, what the movie's named after. It's kind of this big DeMille style epic about a Roman centurion during the days of Christ. And that's George Clooney's character. And so Tilda Swinton's first twin is trying to get an interview with him about certain questionable things or rumors that have come up with regards to one of his earlier films, which I believe is called On Wings of Eagles. And anytime someone brings up this title, On Wings of Eagles, whoever they're talking to gets this faraway look in their eye as if they're immediately transported back to some horrific repressed memory. Like at one point, one of Clooney's kidnappers, who, okay, spoilers here, it's a bunch of Hollywood writers who are converted communists, and end up somehow converting George Clooney's character to communism, Patty Hursting him in a way. One of them mentions On Wings of Eagles, and immediately George Clooney goes and starts instantly remembering it. And every time this title is name dropped, you hear this faraway cry of an eagle, like going through like an echo chamber. So it's almost like Frau Blucher like. So that's what I mean when I'm kind of saying like it's the Coens meets Mel Brooks kind of style comedy in a way, which I feel is a pretty good representation of this style in which they are making fun of but paying homage to that era of cinema where you had the big DeMille style epics, where you had these water ballet type of just kind of frilly musical type movies, where you have Channing Tatum basically doing like his best South Pacific as a sailor, like doing really complex dance routines a la Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire, and with his sailor buddies about how they're going to be at sea for several months, if not years, and there are going to be no dames on the rough waves. You half expect like the Blazing Saddles cowboy cast to come bolting through the bar door, kind of like when you were in Blazing Saddles, like, give 'em a push. Like you expect kind of just that silliness almost, but they toe that line very well so that it's based in some kind of realism. But you got all these scenarios popping up. George Clooney being kidnapped by communists. Scarlett Johansson's issues about adopting her kid. You've got this gossip columnist thing. You've got Brolin having to deal with replacing an actor in a very classy, hoity-toity type film being directed by Ralph Fiennes. He has to replace the lead actor with this very well-known singing cowboy type, who honestly is one of the best characters in this movie because he's just so blunt and at times dim-witted but earnest, and he's like the most likable person out of this bunch. And so you have to take this guy who's so used to just doing stunt cowboy and lassoing tricks and just singing Western tunes into this very highfalutin drama where he has to act, and there's a scene where he and Ralph Fiennes are going over dialogue together, and he's trying his best to emulate Ralph Fiennes' accent and some of his affectations just because he doesn't know what else to do because he's not that great of an actor. And then Ralph Fiennes is like stop it, smacking his like wrist down whenever he takes on too much of his affectation. It's a very funny performance driven movie, and like I said, no matter how big or small the role, you have character actors in this that will milk every second they're on screen. Amidst these group of communist writers, you have David Krumholtz and Fisher Stevens just like hamming it up whenever they have an opportunity for a line. Everyone's talking about these broad ideals and about like the corruption in the movie studio system and about capitalism in general, and you know how this form of government is not conducive at all, trying to ultimately they win George Clooney over. And every once in a while you just have Krumholtz in the back like harumphing about money. He's like, and I wasn't paid enough for this either, like typical David Krumholtz like Jewish stereotype. You have Wayne Knight show up for a small but very pivotal role. He's the one who drugs George Clooney's drink on set, and he also is an extra in the scene with Clooney. So you have him in this Roman toga, playing a liar at Clooney's feet, just watching him, making sure that he takes a swig from this chalice. Every time Clooney almost does and has to deliver a line and doesn't drink from the chalice, you just see this, you cut to like Wayne Knight here down on the ground being like like just utter disappointment and this disdain coming across his face. And it took me a while to be like, that's Newman. And it's just fun to see these people milking this for all it's worth. Frances McDormand shows up for like a minute and a half as an editor, and she arguably gets the most laughs from me just because her thing is so slapsticky. She gets her necktie caught in the editing machine, and it's her and Brolin like panicking, and she's like, hit the reverse switch, and Brolin's over here like, oh shit, flips it, and she goes flying back in her chair. It's a very brief scene. She's not in the rest of the movie, but you know what? It was worth seeing her here. This is a Coen Brothers movie that makes the most out of cameos from both the Highlander and the Kurgan. You get, well, first off, Clancy Brown plays like sidekick to George Clooney's character in this movie, Hail Caesar. So at the very end, George Clooney has this big monologue that he delivers, and every once in a while it'll cut back to Clancy Brown looking at him like, just those awkward off looks. Like, the awkwardness in this movie makes a lot of the comedy for me. And to the point where Clooney, like, he gets invested in this dialogue and, like, almost gets the crew invested and me invested. And then he forgets the last word of the speech and he's like, son of a bitch, and just cut. And you cut to Clancy Brown over here being like, all right, man, you got this. Come on, hurry up. I'm sweating like a damn pig in this thing. Like, just dialogue like that, showing off that, like, this era of movies that we tend to, like, really look back on with a lot of glamour and fondness, I guess. Like, just showing that they're just everyday working Joes that fuck shit up from time to time. Like, that was kind of appealing to me. Like I said, Christopher Lambert shows up as the director of Channing Tatum's musical Gene Kelly-ish type movie, and he only has like one scene with Brolin. He's showing him like pictures of his family, and then he shows him a picture of him doing like that long skiing event. It looks like it, except he's just going down like a hill, and he's caught in midair in the picture, and it's so obviously just a photoshopped face of Christopher Lambert on someone else's body, but that kind of just silliness, like, I gravitated towards pretty quick in this film. But like I said, if that's not your cup of tea, if you're not for just silly tangents for the sake of exploring silly tangents, like like the Coen Brothers would in something like Big Lebowski, I can understand completely why this wouldn't be the kind of movie you'd enjoy. I'm sure there were plenty of people who left my theater being like, what was the point of that? But I feel there is kind of a narrative taking place here, and it's not wholly dependent on the George Clooney abduction thing, which, you know, is in a lot of the promotional material. I feel like the main narrative here is just about Eddie Mannix and him just dealing with the shit. And in a way, he's tempted every once in a while by this representative from another company or another type of conglomerate to join up with them and say, like, you'll get better pay, better hours, and, you know, here's some benefits, here's some gifts for the kids and everything like that. I think it's like a manufacturing conglomerate or something like that. They're invested in like airplanes or new age like travel and so forth. And throughout the entire movie, he's kind of questioning, like, he goes to confession at one point, 2 points in the movie, and they really bookend each other very well. And at one point he asks, it's like, if I do something because it's easy, does that make it wrong? And that was kind of a cool line, honestly, because, yeah, this whole time he's like, you can kind of tell he's frustrated with a lot of the shit he has to deal with in fixing the studio's problems. But at the same time, he weighs that against, like, well, this studio's been good to me and my family, and I enjoy this work. I know how to work with these people. He gives this really good speech at the end to George Clooney to kind of snap him out of his his communist mind track at that point. And he's just saying, it's like, this studio's been good to you. It's like, you're going to do this because you're an actor, and, you know, you have an important role as much as, like, the girl who runs the clapboard or the director of photography or the director of the screenwriters. You all have a function, and you're all going to perform it admirably because the studio's been good to you. And, you know, it is kind of an inspirational speech, and he kind of says it to himself in a way. So I guess there is kind of a main narrative in this movie that seems narrativeless. But you know what? Even if that speech wasn't in the end of this film, I still have enjoyed it just because of the fact that, yeah, these characters are fun to watch. They're fun to, like, just see people perform and go for broke. Channing Tatum in this one, this is the most I've liked Channing Tatum in a movie so far, is he can dance phenomenally. He actually can sing pretty well, if that's his actual voice that they recorded for this musical number. When he's not playing kind of this lighthearted character that he's portraying in this movie, he's a stone cold, like, just blank expression dude who's holding his little Shih Tzu dog like this as he and his communist comrades are rowing a boat out into the bay, a la George Washington crossing the Potomac. So it's silly imagery like that, it's silly performances like that, that people are just going for broke in this movie, that I wholeheartedly recommend this film to anyone who likes the Coen Brothers style of comedy, or if you like it when they just explore characters without necessarily touching upon a big story. But again, like I said, I'll totally understand if some people aren't gravitated towards this pitch as much as others are. Hail Caesar's fun. I thought it was fun. Is it the best movie of the year? I don't know yet because I haven't seen any other movies yet. Tomorrow I get to see Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. That might be a good counterbalance to this.